All right, welcome in. My name is PJ Miller, and along with me, I have Tori. Tori, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing good, man. Been a good week. How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Interesting, we're exactly 1 week from the draft, so it's getting starting to get interesting. You're starting to hear a lot more rumors about what's gonna happen. We've already broke down kind of where we thought the Blazers might, what direction they may go if they stay at 15. So today we wanted to kind of break down the picks at number 20. So I think we have some interesting picks and kind of looking at some of the draft boards from places like Draft Express and stuff like that. And it's kind of funny because the kind of the consensus of who's going to be available where is really kind of changing right now. Have you
Yeah,
had your board
yeah,
changed? Do you think?
yeah. I was high on Ananobi, but there's rumors coming out about him might not being able to play next year, and with Portland's histories with injuries, it's just like I don't know if you can take a guy like that at 15. I've seen him fall a lot, so you start finding out little things here and there. Guys come in for workouts and impress scouts and rise high. Or they don't impress scouts like Lonzo Ball with the Lakers, and all of a sudden, instead of being a surefire number two pick, he might not go to the Lakers. So everything gets crazy about a week before the draft.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Now the rumors starting to come out that maybe he is going to start working out for some other teams other than the Lakers. So maybe his dad wasn't too smart when he told everybody that he was only going to work out for the
Yeah,
Lakers. So yeah, I think the next week's going to be really interesting. The Blazers probably going to be one of the most active teams on draft night because from everything you hear coming out is that they don't want three picks and they don't want to stay at 15, 20, and 26. But you don't really know what combination of picks that they're going to have or if they're going to have any of them. So I think it's really interesting to kind of break down each pick and if they end up staying there, kind of maybe some of the guys that they'd be looking at.
yeah, and with Olsha, you never know. You hear one thing and it goes the completely opposite way. So I wouldn't put too much stock into anything about the Blazers that you hear.
Yeah, smoke screens. Everything's about the smoke screens right now.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and start. We'll start with one of our bigs that we were kind of talking about, and he's a guy who's definitely kind of risen up the draft boards, and that is Justin Patton. So why don't you give us a little bit about Justin Patton?
The first thing is there's definitely a real chance that he won't be available here at 20. So you might look at him at 15, depending on how the draft goes. But if you can get him at 20, that'd be great value because he's a really agile, athletic, quick, big who he has the size to play center, but he also has the mobility and the defensive potential and the shooting touch to slide over to power forward and be all right there. So the biggest thing with me is if you're going to draft a big guy, you want him to be able to play the four because Nurkic has that center spot locked down. So it's good for young guys to know that they have a role that they can grow into. And I like Patton over somebody like Jared Allen because Jared Allen is more of a traditional five who doesn't really have the skills to play four, and Patton could potentially play both.
Yeah, I think he's a pretty good option there. You hear some of the critiques on him. It's just motor. Is he going to be able to kind of take it to the next level when he becomes a pro? Like you said, I think he's got the skill set to play the four and the five, which is really someone that Portland needs. When Nurkic goes out right now, Ed Davis is probably the backup or Myers Leonard, and that's neither of those guys are probably on a championship team good option. So to have another guy who would be able to step up there and maybe guard some bigs if Nurkic goes down for a couple of games. He does have some injury history. Nurkic does. So having someone who could step in there in a starting role possibly down the line would be a good option. But then, like you said, he can kind of play the four. He does have he did shoot well from the college 3-point line in the limited shots that he did take. So he is one of those guys who could play both positions. He moves pretty well, and he is pretty long and athletic. So he is one of those guys, but he is, like you said, rocketing up the draft boards. I think he was in the mid to late 20s probably a month ago, and now he's definitely up. And I think Draft Express had him at about I think they had him at 18 or 17, somewhere right around there. So he is definitely a guy who may not even be available there at 20. So I think he has the potential to be a very good player. He is one of more of the unknowns, I would say. I don't know exactly what you're going to get with him. He does have a higher ceiling, but I also think he has a lower floor than some of the other guys.
Yeah, he's definitely a high risk, high reward type prospect. And for the Blazers with three picks, I think you have to take guys like that. You can't play it safe. And with Patton, you're picking him for what he could give you down the road. He might be able to play, immediately, but physicality wise, he needs to mature and grow into his body. His dad is something like 7'3" and 350, so I assume genetically he has a body that can put on weight. But this is something where you look at maybe pairing him with Nurkic on the starting lineup a few years down the road and hoping that he can develop quickly enough to give you minutes right away.
Yeah, and that becomes kind of the opposite of what a lot of teams are doing. If that were to happen, everyone's going to a small ball lineup. A lot of fours that are, the 6'9", 6'10", able to play a small ball five, and if Portland were able to get a couple taller players to kind of combat that, it may force some people to kind of come at a different route, because he does have the ability to guard smaller players, so that does give him the ability to stay in there with a Draymond Green or some of those other fours, and when they go to small ball five, he could still play the five and stuff like that. So he gives them a lot of versatility at that position.
Yeah, and that's the thing, when the league goes one way, sometimes you want to go a little bit differently. If he can defend smaller power forwards on the perimeter, the Draymond Greens, guys like that eliminates the advantage in the matchup for the other team. So, and then he's so much bigger than small ball power forwards that gives you a big advantage on the boards, big advantage inside. So,
yep. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our next candidate here, and I'm going with the Duke center, Harry Giles. Giles coming off of a couple of knee surgeries. He's had surgery on both knees, so he is kind of a concern for the injury. He, kind of like Patton, has started to move up the boards. Last time I checked, I think he was at 19. So he's another guy who may not even be available for the Blazers when they pick at 20, which is kind of crazy to think how he again was in the lower 20s at the end of the NCAA season. So I think he's kind of proven some people wrong, or proven some people that he can play, that his injury history is or his injuries are somewhat healed. Sounds like he's doing most of his training without a brace. Kind of showing that he has maybe some of that explosion back that he lost with the injury. He is a big guy. He's more of a traditional five, so he would probably come in as a backup to Nurkic. But it also gives you some insurance, because if Nurkic were to go down, you do have another center who probably has a little bit more potential as a straight-up five than Patton does. But the biggest thing, and obviously coming from Portland, is the injury history. He was, consensus number one coming out of high school before he hurt his knees again, tore his ACL, and so that's just really the biggest question mark, is how much of his explosion is going to come back. Defensively, he's very well. He can run the floor very well for a big. A lot of times he's the first big back on offense, so he can get down the court, and it's actually a pretty good passer from the high post. So playing on a Duke team where team ball is definitely emphasized probably helped him quite a bit. So I think that he would be a good option kind of for that high post play. He does have to improve his outside shot, so I think he would be a good option. Again, at 20, I don't think you're looking at some guy who's going to jump in and be a starter. I think he would be kind of a project player, but I think that he has the potential to be pretty good down the road if the injuries don't catch up to him.
Yeah, he definitely fits the theme of go big or go home. Definitely fits the theme of the boom or bust prospect. And I'd love this pick for Portland because if he can regain his athleticism, he'll be a top 5 talent, and he'll be a starter. He'll be a potential all-star. And I like his fit at the power forward and backup center for Portland going forward because he is a good defender and he is just, brushing off the top of his skill set. He hasn't really shown too much in terms of skill, but it's there. He shows flashes. And there was a report, the only report I heard out of Portland's pre-draft workouts was about Giles, and that was how Portland loved him and that most people should expect for Giles to be off the board at 15. So that was an interesting tidbit. Once again, you can't really take Olshay's word for it. If information is leaked, it might be a smoke screen. Who knows? But
agents.
Agents and stuff. Yeah, it's definitely a guy that I would look at 15 and definitely 20 if he's still there. Because if he does regain that athleticism, he'll be a great player. And if he doesn't, well, he will probably find his way out of the NBA quickly. But it's a good risk to take.
Yeah, I just think that the upside, especially if you're looking at him at 20, if at 15 you're probably looking more for a guy who's gonna maybe make a little bit more of an impact right away. If at 20 you can get a guy who maybe 2 years down the road can make an impact, then I think you're doing pretty well. Again, it's kind of depends on also the role that they're looking for as far as how many of the picks they're going to keep. If you're taking 3 picks, you could definitely take a chance on a guy because you have 2 other picks to maybe take guys who are a little bit more solid and are going to contribute a little bit sooner. So I definitely think he's obviously an option for them there, and I think he would be a good option.
Yep.
All right, so we'll move on then. So our next one is going to be Frank Jackson. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Frank Jackson?
I love Frank Jackson as a scoring guard, 6th man off the bench. Most mock drafts have him going in the 2nd round, but I think there's a very good chance he gets picked around this range. I love for Dame and CJ to have a rookie guard to kind of teach the offensive skills that they have too, especially after hearing about how McCollum would teach Dame how to change speeds the way he does, and Lillard would teach McCollum how to get from point A to point B. It was a very interesting article talking about how they tried to mirror each other's strengths offensively. And I think if you brought in a young guard to learn under those two offensively, I think they would help that rookie develop into a great offensive player. And Frank Jackson certainly has the talent. He's a great shooter. Could probably step in right away and shoot a good percentage from NBA 3. He's quick. He can dribble. He reminds me, a little bit of Damian Lillard. Not quite as athletic or as big as he is, but sort of plays the same way. Defense is a question mark, and in this draft, I prefer for the Blazers to take defensive guys, but I wouldn't mind if they took a risk and reached a little bit here on Jackson because I think Dame and CJ could really do wonders for this kid.
Yeah, I think that this is a spot where, again, kind of going back to of what their team direction is, a backup guard could be a place, especially if you're looking to move a guy like Allen Crabbe, depending on, kind of the trades that you have lined up. It's really hard. Like you said, if defensively, you would like to have somebody who's a little bit better defensively, because when you're taking one of these guys off the court, when you're taking Lillard or McCollum off the court, it would be nice to have someone who can step in defensively to maybe put a little bit of pressure on the opposing team. So that would be my biggest question mark with him. Obviously, he comes from a good pedigree with Duke. He was coached well. And I think that he has that opportunity to be around in the league for a while. I just don't know if he's the right fit for the Blazers right now.
Yeah, I could see him, not fitting too well. There is injury concerns with him as well with his foot, and I think the consensus would be that he would be a mid to late 1st round pick if he didn't have foot problems. I don't know what the exact injury is. But I'm not really concerned with that because he's a small guy. I'd be more concerned if he was a big man because foot problems in big men seem to happen again and again and again. But since he's a point guard, quick dude, that's another comparison with Lillard and McCollum. They had foot injuries
Yep.
in college as well. So that's just another link to those guys.
Yeah. All right, and then we'll move on to our last prospect here, and I really struggle. I've tried to pronounce his name like 4 times, and I think I've butchered it every single time. Um,
and Zejis Issac Nicks. That's
yeah,
my best guess at it.
yeah. AP, we'll call him AP. And
Okay.
he's kind of he may be a little bit of a reach at 20. I think that he is probably a mid 25, 26 is kind of where he's sitting at right now. So he should be available there at 20. He's again kind of going back into that mode of if you're going to keep all 3 picks, take a guy who maybe you're developing. He may end up staying overseas for a year or two to develop. But I think that he has a lot of potential. You watch video of him, and he has some pretty good ball handling skills for a guy 7'3", 7'2", and he's got he's 230, so he can still put a little bit of weight on. He's got a pretty good frame. So. I think that he's he's a European player. It's a different style of basketball there, so he's got a very good outside shot, and I think he's something very different than what Portland has, which I think that they could use out of their center position to be able to team up with Nurkic. He would be able to definitely stretch the floor a little bit better. He can, like I said, he can handle the ball pretty well. So he's kind of in that center kind of. The comparison is just because it's the closest. It'd be kind of like the Dirkish kind of style where he can dribble a little bit and he can shoot from the outside. He's obviously I don't want to compare him to Dirk and the fact that he's going to be that good, but same style of play as Dirk.
Yeah, with the way the NBA is going lately, I think it's better for international bigs. More skilled, better shooters. Those are the type of big men that they produce, and that's what the NBA is looking for nowadays. There's been some young big men from Europe recently that have surprised everybody. Jokic is one of them. Nurkic is a steal at 16 in 2014. That's where he was drafted, and he should have went top 5, top 10. So I wouldn't mind gambling on a European big, especially with the recent track record of how well they've done in the league. I think it helps his case that he's an international player because there will be some teams, especially Portland, looking to stash a player because they have multiple picks. The other European player that was projected to go in the late first round dropped out a couple days ago, Rodions Kurucs, or however you say his name.
Yeah.
So I think that helps Issac Nicks' case in that Portland might take him at 20 because they want to stash a guy. In terms of his play style, he reminds me a bit of Patton. They're not the same player, but they're both kind of, a little bit too skinny, going to need to put on some weight, but they're both agile. They're both, have the size of a center, but have the potential to be shooters and to guard the perimeter well enough to play power forward. So he would have room to grow once he came over. He'd have a spot to grow into at power forward if he could play that role. And he kind of reminds me of Porzingis, which they are both from Latvia, and Issac Nicks is friends with Porzingis. So he kind of reminds me of that type of power forward maybe, because Porzingis is 7'3", and he plays power forward, and he does a good job there. So, who knows how good of a shooter he is. Portland probably did a bunch of perimeter shooting with him in his pre-draft workout, and depending on how good of a shooter he is, if he can really shoot the ball from the arc like he's shown flashes of in Europe, then I definitely think he could be a legit player as kind of a 3-and-D 7'2" big man.
It's funny saying something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you got Leonard shooting threes, but he doesn't really bring the D with it. So
yeah.
Somebody that could play both sides of the ball, do both of those would be great.
Yeah. And it's really kind of ironic with Porzingis because when they were coming up, both of them were kind of neck and neck and kind of their development. And Porzingis, just like last year, 2 years ago, kind of took a step in front of in front of him, and really blossomed when he came to the NBA. And he struggled a little bit in the European League. He hasn't grown as much as Porzingis did, and that's why it took him a year longer to try to make the leap into the NBA. So there's been a lot of comparisons between the two because their styles are very similar and they come from the same place and played together a lot. So I think that's what kind of everyone's hoping he'll be is another Porzingis. But I think the skill level is not quite as high, obviously, with Porzingis going much higher in the draft last year. So, I think he's definitely a guy that they can make a reach on, and if they got to stash him for a year or two, then so be it. But if you got 3 picks and you're not trading any of them, it's a pretty good bet.
Yep.
All right, so that'll do it for our breakdown of the number 20 pick. We got, like I said, we got 1 week left until the draft. We got one more pick. We hopefully are going to be able to break down number 26. We want to talk maybe a little bit about some potential, maybe top 10 players if Portland chose to make a trade and get up into the top 10, maybe who they would be targeting. Lots of rumors are flying around with New York and Minnesota and some players that Portland might make a run at. So I think it's going to be a really interesting week. There's going to be a lot of smoke screens. You're going to hear a lot of rumors. It's going to be a lot of agents talking, a lot of GMs trying to improve the value of their draft picks before the draft. So I think it's going to be a really interesting week.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
All right. Well, awesome, Tori. Thanks for coming on, and we will look forward to the draft in a week.
Yep. Thank you.
All right.